Thank you, Corinne. Thanks, John. Just to follow up on my colleague's questioning about the blame assigned to the previous administration, specifically, how is the Trump administration responsible for the disorganized and chaotic process of evacuation and determining who gets to board these evacuation flights? I mean, you mentioned that there's a review in terms of the lessons learned. Can you share some of those lessons learned, just specifically in terms of who gets to board evacuation flights?
I'm not going to go beyond the review, the document that you have today, or my comments today. But I'm actually glad for the question. Because I remember going through all that. And those first few days were very, very tough. They were very hectic because we didn't have a force presence at Karzai International Airport. We were still in the process of taking those pre-positioned forces and getting them onto the field. And we got them there within 48 hours. And about 72 hours after that, that airport was basically, for all intents and purposes, American property, surrounded by the Taliban and ISIS-K. So they not only had to run an airport, get the radars up and going, do air traffic control, get planes coming in and getting them loaded, have medical screening, have security vetting, have diplomatic presence on the ground to make sure that we're putting the right people on planes, but also defend that airport from external threats. That's pretty remarkable. And so for all this talk of chaos, I just didn't see it, not from my perch. At one point during the evacuation, there was an aircraft taking off full of people, Americans and Afghans alike, every 48 minutes. And not one single mission was missed. So I'm sorry, I just won't buy the whole argument of chaos. It was tough in the first few hours. You would expect it to be. There was nobody at the airport, certainly no Americans. It took time to get in there.
Correct. Is there anything in the review that addresses the problem of who was in charge at that time? I think there was a lot of analysis that questions whether it should have been the military who's in charge of the evacuation versus the State Department. And that is partly the problem of the confusion. And I understand your point about planes leaving full of people, but there are also planes who left empty and people falling off planes.
I actually don't accept the premise of your question that there was some sort of confusion over who runs. It was a non-combatant evacuation operation once it was called, and the military leads those. It's pretty clear. Now, we needed the support of the State Department because you had to have diplomatic officers, consular officers, people trained in the vetting of individuals coming in. We needed that help for sure. There was a lot of interagency coordination, and some of it had to be developed in the moment because we'd never done something like this before. But it was very clearly what we call a NEO, a non-combatant evacuation operation, which was led by the military. And let me tell you something else. Non-combatant evacuation operations are probably some of the most difficult, not probably, they are, some of the most difficult operations for any military to conduct.
And can I just follow up on the women's rights issue, John, since you're there? Since the withdrawal, Afghan women have suffered massively under the Taliban, and they have recently banned Afghan women from working as UN staff. Some believe that this is a tactic, a pressure tactic by the Taliban to secure a seat at the UN, Afghanistan's seat at the UN. Do you believe that this is a tactic that will work? Under what circumstances would the U.S. even consider allowing the Taliban to have the Afghanistan seat at the UN?
Again, I think we've talked about this. I mean, we certainly condemn this approach by the Taliban. It is, and we're certainly not going to be compliant with it. If the Taliban wants international legitimacy in whatever form, then they should answer up to the commitments they made in the Doha Agreement and in other agreements, and in this case to be respectful of the rights of women and girls, and they haven't. And so until they do, they're going to be continuing to struggle to gain some sort of sense of legitimacy or assistance from the rest of the world.